Hi, this is Bill Carmody with a review of scales, tonality, keys, and modes. Scales are a series of pitches in order from low to high or high to low, and they start on a pitch class that is the name of the note that's at the first note of the scale. Sometimes you see the scales degrees as 1, 2, 3, the first note of the scale, second note, and when you're indicating that, they use a little caret, a little TP kind of accent above the number to indicate that this is scale degree. You need to know the scale degree names. The first note of the scale is called the tonic, and the second note is the supertonic, the third is the mediant, the fourth is subdominant, the fifth is dominant, sixth submediant, and the seventh is leading tone, and that takes us back to the tonic. The smallest difference between two notes in our notation is a half step, and 2 half steps is a whole step. There are natural half steps between E and F and B and C. Those are 2 white keys that are right next to each other with no black key in between. And if there is a black key in between, then from the white key to that black key is a half step, and skipping over that is a whole step. A tetrachord is a 4-note scale. There are different kinds of tetrachords, and the 4 notes of a major tetrachord are separated by the intervals step, step, half step. So if we have white keys, you start on C, you'll go step, step, half step, start on G, and you stay on the white keys, G, A, B, C. That'll be step, step, half step, all on the white keys. So if you put those 2 tetrachords together, you'll have a C scale. C, D, E, F is the lower tetrachord. G, A, B, C is the upper tetrachord. Major scale is made up of 2 major tetrachords separated by a whole step. So the formula for a major scale, which I think is going to be on the quiz, is step, step, half step, 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 half step. We have half steps between scale degrees 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 for major scales. Scales can start on any note, and so there are actually 15 different starting notes, and this is the circle of fifths. So we go C, start on C, has no sharps or flats. We go from C to C, all on naturals, all white keys, and we have a C scale. If you go from G to G, the F is going to need to be sharp in the upper tetrachord, and if you go from D to D, you're going to have F sharps and C sharps, and so these are all the sharp sides are on the right half of the circle of fifths, and the flat keys are on the left half of the circle of fifths, and the bottom 3 scales are called the enharmonic scales because you can start on D flat with 5 flats, or enharmonically that would be C sharp with 7 sharps. And the same thing with B with 5 sharps, or enharmonically C flat with 7 flats. And G flat or F sharp, they sound the same. They're enharmonic scales, and it's really 6 of one and a half a dozen of the other. You need to know the keys, how many sharps or how many flats are in each key. And of all the things you're going to learn this semester, that's the most important one. So you want to get to where you can name 3 sharps is the key of A, the key of B flat has 2 flats. You need to be able to name those very quickly. The order of flats is BEADGCF. By the order of flats, I mean if you have 1 flat, it'll be B flat. 2 flats are B flat and E flat. The 3rd flat is always A flat. They always come in this same order. So BEADGCF, and notice that the flats go on these lines and spaces, and only on these lines and spaces. So don't take an F flat up an octave or anything like that. It's just this series that looks like this. The order of sharps is the order of flats backwards. FCGDAEB is the order in which sharps come. So if you have 1 sharp, it'll always be an F sharp. If you have 3 sharps, F will be sharp, C will be sharp, and G will be sharp, and nothing else will. One of the things that I always do is when I do key signature quizzes is to have you write the key of C sharp and the key of C flat. And that will show me that you know the order of sharps and what lines and spaces they go on, and the order of flats in their right order on the right lines and spaces. Those are major scales. The minor scales are similar to the major scales, but instead of starting on the first note of the scale, it starts on the sixth. In solfege, which is syllables that we use for singing, the first note of a major scale is do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And for minor scales, the first note of the scale is la, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. There are three forms of the minor scales: the natural minor, which is really a mode, an Aeolian mode, and then the harmonic minor, which raises the seventh note of the scale in order to create a dominant harmony. We'll learn about that later, but basically it gives it a leading tone, a half step away from the tonic. So it starts on A, and the seventh note is G sharp to pull you up to the A. And that works fine, except that when you're singing a song in harmonic minor, you have an awkward skip between the sixth and seventh note. In this case, in A minor, an awkward skip between an F and a G sharp. That's an augmented second. To create smoother melodic lines, for the melodic minor, when you're going up, they raise the sixth as well as the seventh. This is only necessary when you're going up because the sharps will pull up. So when you're coming down, they use the natural minor, and they don't lower those notes, but they don't raise them either. So they become a natural minor. When we talk about minor, we're really referring to harmonic minor. So if somebody tells you that we're in something minor, harmonic minor is what they mean, although in reality composers will switch back and forth between these three forms of minor at will. So sometimes even within the same measure, you'll find two forms of the minor. Parallel minors and majors start on the same note. So D minor and D major both start on D. D is a tonic. In D major, D is do, and in D minor, D is la, la, ti, do. And the relative major and minor, they have the same key signature. So if you have a major scale with two sharps, you're going to start on D. And if you have a minor scale with two sharps, you're going to start on B. And notice that D is do in both cases. So the do doesn't really change. There are other kinds of scales besides major and minor, even though most of the music that is written and performed is in major or minor, mostly major. But there's also music written in pentatonic scales. And pentatonic is the same as the major and minor scales, except that there is no T and no Fa. Do, re, mi, sol, la, do. There's no T, no Fa. Same with minor. You start on la because it's minor. You skip T, la, do, re, mi, sol, la. There are other scales, all kinds of scales, actually a whole bunch of them, but the ones that are in common practice that you will come across, the chromatic scale, which has all half steps. Notice that they use sharps when writing chromatic scales that are going up, and they use flats when they're writing chromatic scales when they're coming down, because sharps pull up and flats pull down. A popular scale that was used by Debussy a lot in the French impressionistic music is the whole tone scale, and this one has no half steps, it's all whole steps. So it's an awkward looking scale, so they don't even use key signatures most of the time, because in this case F is sharp and G is sharp, but C is not sharp, so it kind of falls outside of the major and minor key signatures. An octatonic scale was very popular in the 20th century, and I find that it's still being used by composers today. Is a scale that alternates between whole step and half step. So in this case, we have a whole step between the first two notes, and then we go up a half step, then a whole step higher, and then a half step higher, and then a whole step higher, and so on. And the half step doesn't have to be between the second and third note. It can be between the first two notes. So you could start half step, whole step, half step, whole step, or the other way around, like it's written here, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. In the Renaissance, there were modes, church modes, that have come back into fashion since the 80s. And these are the four modes. They're modes and not scales because there's no leading tone. The seventh note is not a half step away from the tonic, with the exception of the Lydian mode. So the Dorian mode is the same as going from 2 to 2 of a major scale. So in this case, there's no sharps and no flats, so that would be a C major scale, but instead of starting on C, you start on D and stay all on the white keys, and that will be a Dorian mode. If you start on the third note of a major scale, all white keys starting on E, that's a Phrygian mode. 4 to 4 of a major scale is Lydian, and 5 to 5 is Mixolydian. Dorian modes are used a lot in minor for jazz improvisation, and Mixolydian modes are used a lot for jazz whenever you have a dominant seventh chord, a G7 chord. So a G7 would be G, B, D, F natural. So it's like a G scale, but instead of having F sharps, you have F natural. So know these four mode types and what note they start on. So if I said write a Dorian mode with a key signature of 2 sharps, the first note of the scale would be an E. 2 sharps is the key of D. The second note of a D scale is E. So that's how you find that out. Here are some sample questions from the type of thing that you'll find on the test. And notice the one that I have the big arrow at, you need to know your major and minor key signatures, the order of sharps and the order of flats, and the whole step, half step formula for a major scale. So if I said construct a G Dorian mode, that means the first note of the scale is G, and Dorian would tell me that the first note of the scale is the second note of a major scale, so G is the second note of an F scale. So it would be going from G to G with 1 flat. The B would be flat. So that's how you make a G Dorian. Dorian means 2 to 2 of a major scale, and if I give you the first note, then that note is the second note of whatever major scale it's relative to. I hope that helps. See you later. Bye.